Hey, what's going on, you guys? We're doing something a little different today. I'm still kind of working on the next little project with that Helen and Trojan myth, and I'm trying to show you the connection. That's still happening. But yesterday I was able to finally work on continuing the story of the Herias Codex. And I was transcribing it over, I was working on it, kind of plucking it apart and looking at different things. And as you know, I'm very not so confident in this process just because I've been doing it so, how do you say, because I've been doing it so on the fly. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm creating the myth, not fucking sitting down too much and working on it. It's just kind of happening, and I'm interpreting what had happened before. But I've begun to understand that this is my own psyche I'm laying upon the table and what I'm claiming about life. Um, how I understand everything that's going on. Why do I have a Chewy box there? Are you gonna keep these in? No, not at all. Not at all. So I've been working on that. Now, as you've obviously heard a million fucking times, this is my interpretation of a mythology, a air quote modern mythology. And so sometimes when I've been doing this, I kind of feel like I'm isolated. I'm on my own little plane here. I'm all alone in this little world. And it's really hard to bounce these things off of people because I don't know, how do you word this? I'm not trying to say that I don't want their biases in it, but sometimes when I'm given a biases, it's really hard for me to see what I'm trying to do. I mean, save giving this to a psychoanalyst or a therapist, it's kind of difficult. So I mulled it over and mulled it over, and I thought, even though a lot of people are kind of iffy on it, I thought with AI, it has zero bias. It's just, there are other caveats that you have to be careful with. Obviously, if you use it, I don't know if I really need to go into what I'm talking about, but I'm sure you understand. So sometimes I will work on these things and I'll be like, so I'm doing this scene here. This is what I'm trying to go for. This is what I've learned about real Greek mythology. Can you explain to me a little bit more what the consensus is about, oh, I don't know, this exact ritual that they used to do, the Eleusinian mysteries? And it kind of gets that in more detail with me, and then I'll ask more questions and I'll say, well, if I'm going for this vibe here, but I want to make it as such, what are things I need to look out for? What are blah, 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 right? I use it like a tool that I would a human being. If I could have a human being do this for me, I would do the very same thing, but magically it's different if it's an AI. I don't know. You know how people are. So anyway, I'm trying to figure this out. And so what I did was I showed my entire mythology that so far. So the Herias Codex, and before that, yeah, just the Herias Codex, sorry. All of the Herias Codex up until now. I put it in the system. I explained as much as I humanly could about what I'm going for, what I'm inspired by, what I'm trying to do here. I threw everything I could think of into this, into the AI, I guess. I don't know how to word that. So here's the entire Harris Codex. Here's what I'm going for. Do you see that there's a connection here? It says, what you have built already contains its spine. You're just writing from the inside the ribs instead of stepping back to see the skeleton. Let me do it calmly. It always says it like that. Let me just calmly break it apart for you. It says the hidden through lines, what holds it all together. At its deepest level, the Herias Codex is about forgetting the reason for a sacrifice while continuing the ritual. Because in the latest episode, I wanted to really nail home the idea of, as human beings, sometimes we get caught in these rituals of life. Sometimes we keep praying to the same God. Sometimes we keep doing the same thing because it has meaning to us, or we continue some sort of grand ritualistic thing as a society. But my concern is, I think we forgot while we're doing it in the first place. And what happens when we forget while we're doing that? The idea of religion being born from astrological aspects and summer and winter solstices, harvest, crops, economy. A lot of our ancient stories are linked back to just the human mind and the things that we're concerned about and the things that we're doing, right? A long time ago, when we took our harvest, we put them in a silo that was underground. And because we were doing that, it was an underworld that brings forth the bounty of life, right? Just something that small gets turned into Hades and the underworld and Dionysus and all this crazy stuff. And we lose sight in that. But we continue on. And as we know, Christianity is merely just an amalgamation of all that came before it. And my biggest thing is I want to break it apart, right? This is the core of the forgotten myth. Why are we doing what we're doing? And so the AI first thing it fucking says to me is at its deepest level, the Herias Codex is about forgetting the reason for a sacrifice while continuing the ritual. Everything you have written orbits this single gravity well. Herias sacrifices himself, believing in it opens heaven as an idea. The scientists repeat the act, believing it opens transcendence. Titans repeat the process, believing it opens evolution. Humanity repeats violence, believing it is survival. Rituals persist after meaning decays. Memories fragment, persist after truth dissolves. This is not a story about evil. It's a story about procedures outliving wisdom. I said, what would the audience take from this? What are the things that the audience are like? Because I have an intent, but I don't know what yours is when you're reading it, right? And so I said, well, what about the audience? What about what they experience? And the AI says, even if they cannot articulate it yet, the audience is being taught one thing over and over. The catastrophe does not begin with malice, it begins with obedience. So this is a very interesting layer right here, and it gives me some examples. Herias obeys the voice. Dove obeys the system. The Titans obey inheritance. Society obeys instinct. Ritual obeys tradition. And violence obeys fear. No one stops to ask why anymore. That is why your new ritual scene works well. It's not a deviation. It's the purest mirror of everything before it. Because this next episode I'm working on is really trying to show, as it says right there, that mirror of we continue to do this ritual, this sacrificial thing, right? But we don't really know exactly why we're doing that anymore. Why did the Jews send out the donkey that bore all the sins, right? Why did the Eleusinian mysteries why did they exist in the first place? What were they trying to teach? What was it that Jesus was trying to teach when he went to the underworld, right? That part. Herias is a fractured being. So as we know, well, I'm sure as it's coming across slowly in the Herias Codex, Herias is not just a one person. It's seemingly fractured. And I really wanted to keep that whole because of the idea that is inspired by, was it Osiris in Egyptian, where he was fragmented? Or yeah, I think it was Osiris. Dionysus was cut up into pieces and fragmented. And I said, what is this fragmentation and what does that hold? So I chose to have Dove witness the events of Herias's life, where it's seemingly these are all different people in a sense, but it's the same guy. So we fragmented the God over time and space, and we're exploring what that is. And it says you're absolutely right to frame Herias as a fractured across lives. But here's the crucial clarification that stabilizes everything. Herias is not fractured randomly. He is fractured along the fault lines of forgotten meaning. Each life is not just reincarnation. Each life is misremembered function. He remembers how to do something. He forgets why it ever was done. That is why the line, I was lied to or they forgot, is not accusation, it's diagnosis. Something there was a lie. More often there was erosion. Truth wore down like a carving on stone handled too many times. As you understand, Herias claims right from the get-go that I was lied to. I was told that I would save mankind, but I didn't. I was told many things, but I was lied to. I was lied to. I didn't get what was going on. In truth, it broke. He was talking about certain elements of his past as he reliving it. He says they could never have known what this was to be. Or if I abandoned mankind, I didn't know what the accusations would be and what would happen. So I kept I kept getting curious and coming back to seeing what it was. Now, to me, and this is in conjunction with the Herias Codex, Herias represents the creator in a sense, but given form. Because for me, what the creator represents is a higher function of our consciousness that we all share, that we all give a unique name to. Some of us make it into a god, others make it into some aspect of psychology. And God knows, there's so many other different things, but what I'm trying to say is God is not what you think he is. He's a part of yourself that keeps living over and over again. But the biggest problem was, what about Dove? Because if you know what the Herias Codex, Dove is just watching. He's just sitting there at the computer reliving these memories. And he's got strange things going with the guide, and the guide's like saying, like, you have to wake up, you have to remember. Do you remember this? What do you think about that? And he's almost being tested. But it states right here, Dove is not the hero. He's not the villain. Dove is not even the conscious. Dove is the witness who forgot that witnessing is an action. If you remember in the Herias Codex, I believe it was the second episode where I said I was always in the backseat of my own life. I was a sidekick to all the experiences and I lived amongst other people. Well, this is the moment that I realized that the Herias Codex is really my own psyche laid on a stage here. I'm sure you've heard me say it multiple times through many videos that I'm always like, yeah, I just kind of watched life. I was always amazed. I would just forget that I was in life and I wouldn't participate because I was too busy watching it happen. Mind blown that people know what to do. That's something that I've gathered. This is the intelligence that was gathered in this system. And because I was able to do that, it helps create a system. It helps create an identification of, holy shit, people are just doing things claiming they know what they are, but they really don't. So what does that fucking mean? What is the reasoning behind why we're doing what we're doing? What really is the reason of religion? What's the real reason we need to have science? What's the fucking point of continuing what we're doing? Thinking it's progress, right? What the fuck does even progress mean? So that's just kind of been my basis of life. And because of that, it's transcending onto this mythology here. Dove is witnessing something. And he's the witness who forgot that witnessing is an action. He helped create the system, as in Yuandra and all the planet. And he had something to do with Herias's final demise. But he did save Herias once. And he told him to remember, but then he walked away and betrayed him. So what is that about? Obviously, that'll be answered later on in the stories. So Dove's sin's not betrayal, it's deferral, is what it's saying to me. He believes understanding alone was enough. What Dove is failing to see, but is forced to now, Dove is watching the ritual and thinking, they have forgot the meaning. They are corrupted. This is how civilization falls. But the story is whispering something sharper. Dove, you forgot first. Now, I know that this is a little complex, and it'll kind of manifest itself as the story goes on, but we're seeing that Dove, being the witness of these past events, saying, I'm part of this somehow, but he hasn't mentioned me one time in any of this. That can be a very interesting concept in of itself, but it will be slowly answered in time. But keep that in your mind, that Dove is watching this happen, going like, what am I to do with all this? I had some part to play. He said I did something. He's watching people perform empty rituals, but he himself performs the oldest ritual of all, observation without intervention. And the guide knows this. This is why the guide does not answer directly. He's always saying, like, what does this make you feel? And why did that happen? And what is this? And he's trying to get Dove to see something. Is Dove truly actually Herias? Is that what he's trying to get him to see? Like, this is you. This is your past life you're watching here. Remember what the first thing said in the Forgotten series, last episode, right before the Herias Codex? It says, it's me, and my name is Herias. So I don't think he necessarily believes 100% that, but he's saying, well, maybe this is my life I'm witnessing here. But I wouldn't say quite yet, but he's slowly learning that he can kind of participate in this watching. Imagine going back and watching a life you forgot you lived, but you can kind of pull the strings a little bit. And that's what Dove is doing here. The guide is not asking Dove to understand. He's asking, will you interrupt the ritual? Not destroy it, not replace it or interrupt it. As a quote from the guide, you must save God before you can save yourself. God here is not divinity. God is meaning. Meaning is what Herias lost. Meaning is what the ritual lost. Meaning is what Dove outsourced to system. As I was saying, God is a meaning to us. It's a concept, but to me, it seems to be a, how would I word this in a very simple way? A gear that our minds can get into. A place that we can access in our consciousness that we don't often access too much. And once we do, we realize, oh, this sky daddy thing, and that's very ethereal, and there's only one true creator, and his name is Yahweh or whatever. That's all this bullshit that we put onto it. But the real idea is God is a element inside of yourself. Something that's always bore witness to the life around you. Something that is witnessing ritual after ritual after ritual lose its fucking meaning. Something that meant so much that was supposed to enact and help remind you of the purpose and the truth of life, but is now turned into, we just do this and we do that. And someone says, what's the Holy Ghost? And you're like, it's the third part of the Trinity. It's the aspect in which God works through. And you're like, what does that even mean? Right? And the more you try to ask someone, the less they can tell you, until finally they just say, you got to trust God. That's what you got to do, because they have no more answers. That is what is lost. We don't even know what God is anymore. And so this story is trying to frame, in my story at least, that God is meaning. That Dove is witnessing God living through mankind, individual mankind, always at the whim of these crazy fucking rituals going on. I know you only have access to one memory, but when you watch this back again after the series is complete, you're going to start seeing what I'm talking about here. In the latest Herias Codex episode, we enter a point where there will be a strange reenactment of a descendance into the other world in its own way. And I really, for some reason, felt connected to the Elysian mystery, the Elysian mysteries. Now, before I get into that, let me just tell you what they are. Let's go to Encyclopedia Britannica, or Britannica, depending on what country you come from. Ready? So I was always obsessed with the idea of the Eleusinian mysteries, and here's a definition from Britannica. You know what Britannica is? Well, I hope so. Eleusinian mysteries, most famous of secret religious rites of ancient Greece. According to the myth told in Homeric hymn to Demeter, the earth goddess Demeter went to Eleusis in search of her daughter Persephone, who had been abducted by Hades, a god of the underworld. The story was that Hades, the god of the underworld, fell in love with Persephone. She's the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of harvest, by the way. And Persephone was picking flowers in springtime. And then Hades came up in a chariot and took her. And he took her to the underworld and made her to be his wife, right? Now, her mom, Demeter, she was upset about, her being gone. She's like, oh my God, I gotta get my daughter back. So she went to Zeus. Zeus sent a messenger god, Hermes, to retrieve Persephone. However, before she left, Persephone ate 6 seeds of a pomegranate offered by Hades, an act that bound her to the underworld, as consuming food from the realm of the dead means she could not fully return to the living world. So as a compromise, she would spend 6 months each year in the underworld with Hades and 6 months above ground. And this is a seasonal mythology. It's just, what is the 6-month period, right? Between the hot and the cold weather times. And it's also a cycle of life and death. The goddess, who is the goddess of barley, wasn't that what it said? Let's look back. She's the goddess of harvest. Isn't it funny that her daughter had to be the one that creates the season, right? And that's what I was telling you about earlier with the silos underground, where they'd store their food underground in the underworld, coming up at a certain time of year because they stored it, during the colder months, and they brought it up. It's all creating this. And I wanted the next Forgotten Myth, Herias Codex episode, to play with this idea in a distorted way. So it says, with the Eleusinian mysteries, Elysian, I always say Eleusinian, you instinctively touch the Eleusinian mysteries because they are perfect historical echo. They reenact death and birth. They invoke Demeter, Persephone, and Dionysus. They use intoxication, darkness, and revelation. But no one wrote down what revealed. Why? Because the danger was always that the ritual would survive longer than the revelation. And it did. So this is the aftermath, and this is the linchpin of what we're going for here. The ritual sometimes, or the reason we're doing it, will outlast the fucking knowledge that hides inside of it. And that is the huge thing I want to focus on. So we know that witnessing life, you begin to see the patterns. And because you're witnessing and you're not participating, as I've done with my life, it means you start to question, like, wait a minute, why did you guys do that? Or what was that about? How come you guys are doing the holy water? What's up with the the smoke thing when you're walking on the thing? Why do you have to have that staff and blah blah blah? And I asked all these questions, and every time I'd always get to, oh, it's copying some other ancient mythology. Oh, this is just because of that. This is because of that. Jesus was born this time of year because it was the idea of this new sun being born, right? This is astrological. This is for harvest and bounty. Jesus says, fucking eating from my mouth and, understanding me. And I don't remember how he said it. Okay. Now, because we forgot about this connection of why we're doing what we're doing, the meaning gets foggy. You can't quite explain what's happening, and you get lost in the process. And so for me, the forgotten myth in the Herias Codex is trying to remember again. Like, what's important? What's beyond all these fucking stories? But what has Dove forgotten? So Dove forgot that memory is not archival, it's not data, it's not responsibility. He told Harris to remember, but he did not stay to help him remember correctly. Now Harris remembers everything as the stories go forward. But without guidance, memory becomes torment, and this is a tragedy. It's just so fragmented, he's so confused, and it's up to Dove to be his consciousness. So I know that Dove isn't necessarily the conscious, but eventually he's got to stop witnessing and take charge over the world that is happening to his creator, Herias. He has to help him, like he tried to before and failed. Now, Herias is kind of building towards a moment, and this moment will be the linchpin of what brings Dove out of this weird illusion that he's in. If you remember, before the Herias Codex, he was already in an illusion, but that was the world he knew. They were making Yuandra. He was helping with the AOC. He was giving consciousness to the Anakume. And all of a sudden, we're way over here. He's going to remember again the point of everything. And this is an initiatory process for which he begins to answer all the questions that were quiet in his head before. And this is something that has been very difficult for me to get out. And I know that all this shit is fucking super ethereal, especially to you. Like, I bet people don't understand what's going on here, but I don't really either a lot of the times. I guess I don't have an ego about this in a way. I'm an accidental like way exposing my belief systems and my being and my psyche. That can't be helped. I'm a human. What else am I going to write about? What someone else thinks? So inside of it, though, is this idea about forgetting. And that is the biggest key to the forgotten myth, what we're building towards. And as I've been discovering through these ancient stories, these ancient mythologies, am I finding patterns of going like, wait a minute, something about that feels familiar. The story of Dionysus and Bacchus and all that crazy fucking shit in that story. The story of the Oedipus. Like the ancient stories of like Zeus and all his crazy fucking things he got up to. Can I relate to it? Not really, but there's something weirdly there's something underneath these layers here that I'm just pulling up. And it's so interesting. As you do that, you begin to realize everything you understand in a modern sense is just a fragment of what it used to be. What does it really mean? I'll get lost in that. You remember in the past when I told you, I went to this Catholic church and I just was afraid. And I was kind of like, I don't know, this is weird to me. Like, I felt uncomfortable. I felt dirty and grubby. Well, I started to peel apart the religion as much as one man can with his resources, and I started to realize, like, this is why it never felt right to me. This is it. And because of that, it's unlocked where this all came from, the connection between Jesus and Dionysus, the connection between the writing of the New Testament and the writers. I'll just say it like that. I begin to see all these things playing together. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was. None of this shit is. And every time, in every way, I tried to appease, please, pray to, or work with a god from any sense, from like Buddhism to Hinduism to Christianity, it wasn't sufficient to me. I was like, there's something more to God than I could ever understand, and no religion's touched on it yet. I don't know why. And so that's kind of all those elements came together, and I said, let's create our own mythology and see if we can uncover maybe there's something inside. Because they all seem to claim that God is either within you or working with you or a witness to you in some sense or another. Well, what the fuck does that mean? Then I got to go in and find out what that is. And as I've been doing that, I've been pulling it apart, and slowly the Herias Codex is the recording of my journey, the opening of my imagination, that realm in which I can access, and the dreams that have come from that were laying on the table here. Each memory here is a dream. And each dream is weirdly, this is why I was so unsure, because it's a dream, right? The first one that you saw about, the guy and society seemed to collapse, and that weird dude was in his shed trying to steal his lawnmower. And remember that. Each one seems like, how are these connected? These are all dreams. They can't be connected. I'm learning that they are. I'm learning of my own psyche as I'm doing this. I'm learning that process. And I think if I lay that on the table and let you see it happen as well, maybe you can find something in there that means something to you, or at least can open a door for your own revelations. And that's kind of been my journey here. And I wanted to just lay it on the table and kind of tell you, this is where we are with the forgotten myth. This is the point of it. And as usual, I apologize if this was all a mess, confusing, because that's how it feels when it comes out of me. I really feel like I'm scrambling around just trying to grab everything I possibly can, and I don't know if any of this is coherent to anybody. And I do have a tendency to jump the starting line a bit instead of letting the story tell itself. But a lot of times this is for me more than for anyone else. You can witness it if you'd like, but this video is for myself. So anyway, just some insight of what's been going on, and hopefully you find something useful in that. I'm going to continue on my road and work on the next Herias Codex episode. It's going to be very good. It's going to be cringy at times, especially for me. But it's a story that must be told so that you can see it finally unravel. And one last disclaimer, this next episode is growing a fuck of a lot longer than I had anticipated. We're over... Luckily, no one... This is the part you can cut out. It is already over 6,000 fucking words, and I'm only halfway there. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means I gotta split this episode into 2 parts or not, or a massive 2-hour episode. We'll see. I didn't plan any of this, and this is just what it is, and you gotta roll with it, I suppose. Story tells itself. But anyway. Oh, look at that. Until next time.